So I'll introduce myself real quick, and Shray, I'll kick to you as well. But great to speak with everyone today. Excited for this conversation. This is something that I think both of us are very passionate about, and in a very, very much changing space of how we engage with consumers in this current world and where it's going, especially with COVID. But Andrew Horning here, one of the directors on the media ad sales business with Kroger Precision Marketing over the total digital tech stack. And Shray, I'll let you introduce yourself as well.
Yeah, so as it shows there on the little picture there to the left, so I lead up all of digital and growth for Health-Ade Kombucha. So we are a gut wellness brand where we sell products that are based in prebiotics, probiotics, kind of the champions of gut health. So really starting to kind of spread that message around this topic that's starting to really blow up here over the past couple of years.
Love it. And Shray, on that note, do we want to start with just giving a little bit more context for you to tell us a little bit more about the Health-Ade brand and the journey that you guys have been on, especially over the last few years?
Yeah, I think that it would be pretty interesting to also chat maybe through the way of like consumer engagement too, just like kind of the topic, right? So Health-Ade started here around, 9 years ago now, 10 years ago now. And so, the landscape of consumer engagement, the way that we built the brand was completely different. We were going to, Sunday and Saturday farmers markets to go and kind of engage with the consumers back in the day before, iOS and Apple kind of like revolutionized the whole advertising game. And so, a lot of our, the way that we built the business was, get liquid to lips, get them to try it, they'll love it. And we'll have customers forever. And so as we've continued to scale, obviously doing all of that kind of tastings and the in-store isn't as scalable, or that's just not how consumers typically engage with brands anymore. So we've shifted the model over, especially here with COVID, to being like a more digitally native, digitally heavy brand. So if we're looking at where we started, it was just our kombucha offering. But now as we've kind of scaled up as well, we have kombucha, we have mixers. Health-Ade Plus is a line that we just recently launched. So adaptogens and botanicals that are functional to specific moments throughout the day: immunity, happy, chill. We've launched that product line, and then recently we've launched our first diversification into prebiotics, which was Health-Ade Pop. So it's our prebiotic healthy soda alternative that's kind of getting us outside of just kombucha and kind of more into the general gut health universe that we're building.
Love it. And Shray, to that point, I think the kombucha space represents such a growing category, right, within beverage. I think what's interesting to your point you made earlier, how has consumer engagement shifted for your brand and your products, especially over the last, call it 1 to 2 years?
The best part about our consumer is that it is typically that more health conscious, tech savvy, up with the trends consumer. And so, it's all a game of just matching attention and kind of where it's being allocated. So typically it used to be, the growing new category that was kombucha. We were super early in the space. Engagement wise, you had to do a lot of in-store learnings, but now that kombucha is kind of now a mass market product, and, a lot of people understand what it is, we've had to switch the engagement metrics to doing, well, why us, and, what makes us different for, our core basis. And that's going to be, a very different set of messaging from our top of funnel of, maybe being a little bit more probiotics, gut health oriented from a solutions based, just because, screaming kombucha all day, every day to every single person might work. But we found that, really focusing on the benefits of our product, it has been much better for driving net new engagement. But from that, that other side of, well, how has it kind of shifted over time? With our core audience, what we've seen is that, they've been actually kind of like screaming for us to do digital, to, build up our social, to build up our email, our SMS. That about a year and a half ago, we really started to delve deeper into digital, and we were seeing the moment we launched our like official email and SMS platforms, we were getting 30-40% open rates with over 100K or 100K subscribers on our email list. So I think for us, engagement just typically matches like if you're a normal consumer, what are you spending your time on throughout the day? Most of the times for most people right now, it's their phone and their laptop. So we've kind of shifted where, attention is there.
Sure, sure. And what you touch on digital. What channels have you guys seen, starting to rise to the surface, especially in being effective, in the COVID world and hopefully soon coming out of the COVID world?
I think we've gone so multi-channel at this point, social,
Sure.
search, YouTube, online video, display, retailer media, obviously working with 8451, plugging across all these different platforms. I think that that's the barrier to entry for a brand at our scale is to be omni-channel. But where we've seen efficiencies where we start to win on the platforms is we've switched over from being a let's make a piece of creative that gets thrown everywhere kind of company to like let's make very contextual native content for each individual platform to drive we're talking about here consumer engagement. Social for us as a team, we do extremely well. I think, we're killer storytellers here at the HealthAde team. So those more video platforms do great for us. And for a more technical product, let's call it like kombucha, people want a little bit more depth to it. So, we lean heavier into those channels where we can more easily do that storytelling. And from a non-advertising perspective, email, SMS, our blogs, recipes, those do, amazing work for us to kind of deepen that consumer journey.
It's great. I think I remember you saying, a more and more of a focus on channel specific content creation specialists, if you will, and how necessary that is to appeal to the consumer in an authentic way in this market, right? Especially with digital advertising, continuing to scale and more brands wanting to reach folks, via digital platforms, whatever channel we're talking about. Content is so key, right?
I mean, when you think about it from a macro level, I think a lot of the old school media buying tactics were, those first mover advantages, simply just being a part of digital marketing was the way that you won in digital marketing, I would say, for the first 5 years.
Sure.
CPAs were extremely cheap, CPMs are extremely cheap. But now that it's kind of getting to a more, let's call it competitive landscape, the actual doing of the media buying isn't going to be what's driving that impact. Most of these platforms have such amazing audience targeting in itself that it's really about just making something that somebody wants to engage with, right? Nobody wants to really see an ad anymore. People want to see content that, make them smile, they can share with their friends, cutting through the noise as we were kind of chatting about the other week.
Yeah, no doubt. And that kind of leads to another kind of build question, but, with all the expansion in the space and, the need for authenticity, to the right shopper, the right consumer, what have you, what do you see? What do you see as big bets in the digital media space kind of coming out of COVID? What channels stay and grow, as well as what, start to fade a little bit?
I would say the over reliance of social channels will, over time, kind of die down. And I think that what we'll start to see is, especially for us, we're doing a really good job of driving awareness. And, this year has been a really big focus for that. So when we're looking at next year, it's like, well, how do we really start to focus on that middle of funnel consideration kind of consumer? And that's when we're leaning heavier into that retailer media, that more consideration based media targeting. But when we're also looking at big bets for, let's call it digital, I think what we're going to start to see is that a lot of inefficiencies that we used to see in out of home or, in store, you're starting to see retailers bring a digital experience into their actual retail accounts. And so for us, that's something that we're going to be, heavily leaning into, is this kind of in-person digital marketing. That's a very different unit or experience that consumers are not necessarily used to. And so I think that, breaking through that noise, either through, we were saying, content on those bigger platforms that will continue to kind of invest heavily into, is going to be one bucket for us. But that second bucket that we're, going to be taking big bets on next year are those new channels, those new platforms, those, new digital experiences, because you have that first mover kind of
Sure.
benefit there.
Yeah. And how, I know we talked about this, so curious to hear, how are you guys gauging success in that space, right? Whether it's,
Yeah.
advertising to drive brick and mortar or
Mhm.
really just digital media in general. I think that's, a key topic across the industry right now, right?
Mhm.
Is how do we drive more accountability, if we want to call it that, to digital
Yeah.
media, right? How do I know that my investments are driving purchase and, not driving someone else's business? How do you guys think about that?
Yeah. So I think that there's like three parts, right? It's what are we doing for the business? Is that directional? What are the KPIs there? How are we driving measurement, or how are we kind of measuring success from a consumer engagement, the number of consumers, clicks, likes, comments? But I think, the last part that's the most important part. How are we making it easier for consumers to engage with us? Are
Sure.
they taking pictures of our content? Are they sharing their experiences? Are they starting to, send pictures of their group chats of like, hey, this is my new favorite flavor. Do you see this Health-Ade ad or this post on organic social? Like, this was awesome. And so that bucket we started to really, go heavier in, because I think that so much of digital now needs to be community oriented. I think that's like just really the biggest way to win these days. So that is a massive bucket for us in that like consumer engagement, customer engagement bucket, which is how shareable, how likable, how viral can we be? When it comes to that middle bucket of, how are we engaging with our consumers? It's the typical, we're going into our email and SMS, looking at our open rates, our click through, our, attributed revenue generated, all the more classic performance metrics. But, where there's typically always been more of an art than a science is in that first bucket. How does digital media advertising actually drive to dollar growth for the business? And so that's really been a couple of big activations or big undertakings that we've done this year. We've built a pretty robust system of how we go about testing media. We'll do very focused, geo-targeted regions where we'll run a couple types of media across the country. So say that in the Northeast, we'll do some Facebook geo-targeting. In San Diego, we'll do some display unit testing, and we'll look at those very key, like those very small specific regions, and we'll look at, well, what was the, velocities that we saw in store that week? How did that compare to the stores around that area, to the national average for that retailer, and then from like a total category for Health-Ade as well as total category for kombucha. And so using those small scale tests, those have been really insightful for like, how do we scale up in media? Because, as it scales and as you kind of go more national, you add a lot more noise and it gets a little bit more difficult. So we use those small scales as a kind of way of testing. So, we'll even go about it the other way, where we've run national campaigns and we bring it back into key regions to make sure that it's continuing to have impact. But then the other side of it is e-commerce, right? Like that's been the biggest part of digital marketing. Is no longer do you have to kind of just bet on awareness kind of winning. Very directly, you can see the clicks, time on site, have that be your D2C, your Amazon, your e-retailer sites. You can see number of add to carts. You can see number of followers as a result of a campaign. So we've been using a lot of those secondary metrics and tertiary metrics as you go down the funnel as our measurements of success versus, how we typically all used to look at it, which was more how many number of eyeballs can I hit?
Sure. Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. And building on that, kind of going back to a point you made a few minutes ago, as we think about, measuring success and what are those accountability factors, you hit on something that I wanted to kind of double down on. And that's, how do you think about as a marketer, the impact of digital or online media driving offline impact, or really, in-store brick and mortar impact? I think that's, becoming more and more of a focus and more of a kind of a hypothesis that marketers want to validate, right? Is, hey, if I reach someone with any kind of ad online, right, what is my mix of someone buying online versus buying in store? How do you think about that, and what do you guys view that?
I think we always look at everything as like a total business P&L, right? So what types of media are not going to only drive our typical in-store velocity gains, but what is that actually doing back up to our, our digital platforms? Same way back down. What are we doing on digital and how is that affecting in store? And for almost every single media type that we've been running, a few exceptions like affiliate marketing, where obviously it's going to be driving directly to site with a promo. Um, we've seen that since we have such massive distribution, those digital platforms, those digital media types are driving more dollar growth for us than our e-commerce businesses. So we're actually seeing a higher amount of dollars generated for every single digital dollar spent offline than we are seeing online. And so when we're then comparing those two worlds together of like, all right, we have this bucket where, let's say hypothetically, we've spent $1 on a digital ad, it generated $2, offline, $2 online. That to us is a much better model than, driving these massive old school billboard ads where, what is what is offline? We can kind of
Sure.
guess, but not really know. And then it's even more noise from the digital, not really able to kind of measure. So, what we've really done is that from a digital perspective, we've seen the online and offline benefits, and then we've seen from a in-person perspective, we've started to do a lot more things where for next year we're going to drive it back into digital. So if we're doing a wheat pasting or an out-of-home experience, are we doing like an experiential QR code? Are we driving them to follow our social media, to sign up for SMS, so that we kind of build that accountability like we were talking about with our media platforms?
Sure. And it's interesting you say that, because that's, a learning that's been crystallized more and more over the past year on our kind of retail media side as well, right? Is, the value of an in-store or a digital ad driving in-store purchase when you might not otherwise think it, right? You might think, okay, digital media ad, someone's going to click on it, they're going to buy, in an e-commerce format, versus, it's been interesting to understand through a lot of our analytics on the retailer side that, yeah, these digital media ads are driving, more of an omni-channel, and because of that, so necessary to create that advertising strategy that gives the shopper choice, right? Hey, this is something where purchase however you want, right? On mobile, on desktop, in the store, what have you, through whatever channel. That omni-channel gets thrown around a lot, right?
Right.
But that, that ability to give the shopper choice to buy wherever, especially right now when there's so much, hey, one week I may buy, my groceries online, the next week I may go into the store, right? It's such a fluid world that we live in now.
It's interesting, right? Because it's like, let's talk about food and bev, because that's where I've always plugged in.
Yeah.
From a new customer engagement, for digital to work for a lot of those brands, they have to do these 12 packs, they have to do the 6 packs, the subscription platforms. And a lot of consumers don't try products in that way. And so when you're thinking about your digital marketing, there's going to be that subset, and you're always optimizing for your, your CAC, CPA, LTV there. But, the majority of the consumers are going to want to go and try out your product for $4 or $5 or $2 even in store. And, that digital marketing actually helps drive that decision. And then what you'll see is that, for a lot of those consumers that love it, they'll come back online and, stock up as a result of, they don't have to lug 12 bottles of kombucha home, and it's cheaper than buying it in store. So from just like thinking about it from a customer perspective, it's like, yeah, it's kind of obvious, right? Not every single dollar that I'm spending when it comes to food and beverage is online. Majority of it is actually in retail. And so those digital ads are kind of helping me make those decisions of what are the things that I want to try the next time that I'm in the store.
Sure. And to that point, what role, within your guys' business, what role do retailers play? And whether it's the digital consumer engagement strategy or just kind of at a macro level, that's, to your point, that's where so much focus continues to go. And in marketing activity is how are we, personalizing our marketing efforts to the specific channel or the specific retailer that we're looking to drive, right? So what role do you think retailers play in that?
they built our business, right? Like our retail partners are what allowed us to be where we are now. And so when we're looking at it from a retailer engagement perspective, let's go back to the omni-channel marketing. And so when we're doing those big campaign moments, we do an amazing job of, working with our trade and shopper team, upfront of, we have this big campaign going on. Let's start to bring that online experience in store. So we're making that kind of connection of, say we have this, fuel your gut sweepstakes giveaway. We're going to do all of our email, all of our SMS, all of our paid media to get signups. But you're also going to see a lot of that signage, a lot of that POS in store. And so without that kind of additional retailer touch point, you're playing this game that everybody else is playing in digital of just, going for a frequency game. But when you have that retail in-person kind of touch point, I think it adds this layer of validation back to the consumer of like, oh, this is not just like another brand that is targeting me with their ads. This is a brand that, is actually kind of everywhere. And I think that just that distribution or that those multiple in-store, in physical touch points adds this layer of it being as useful as like a PR quote or a customer quote. It's like, oh, these guys are everywhere. They're legit.
Sure.
Let me try now. So I think that that's one perspective of how kind of retail plugs in for us. But then from the retailer media perspective, I mean, if we're doing all this top of the line marketing and we're not driving to our individual retail, stores and accounts, we see that we have too much of a kind of leaning in on e-com. But the majority of consumers for food and beverage, still over 80% are buying in retail. So we really do take advantage of all those relationships, with our retailer partners, have that be retailer media, have that be, working with driving to, Kroger.com, Target.com, Walmart.com, all these individual, retailer accounts and .com businesses to drive consumers into that purchase decision. So
Sure.
they're the other half, I would say, of what we're kind of doing actually.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. And question, kind of related to that is, with all these different retail media networks popping up, right? KPM being one, Walmart Connect, Amazon, Albertsons, CVS, et cetera. Every major retailer having their media network now, right?
Mm-hmm.
You as a marketer that sits over top of all of those, what does, true partnership look like in that space? Curious to understand a little bit more. I think that's not just to KPM or to Kroger, but rather, there's going to continue to be, collaboration, right, to a certain degree and varying degrees based on all the different retailers. But I think that's important to recognize is at the end of the day, any marketer you're talking to oftentimes at a certain level sits over, a large number or all these retail media networks, right? And, curious to hear from you, what looks like help in that space and what does true partnership look like?
I think there's two parts to it. I think number one, let's talk about it from like the consumer, and number two, let's talk about it from like a reporting as a KPI, the actual like nit and grit nerdy side of the media. A lot of digital marketers, a lot of marketers know their consumer very well. They know what angles are going to get consumers to engage. They know what kind of key messaging really works for specific groups of individuals. But where we lean heavier into our retailer partners, it's like you guys know the individual who's walking into Kroger. What are they kind of thinking? What are they doing? Are they more of a stock up consumer? Are they more of a discovery consumer? What are the actual behaviors that you guys are seeing as a company over time? And how do we then cater our kind of consumer messaging in the context of that individual consumer that's walking into the store, in the same way that we do content that's very different for YouTube than for Facebook than for TikTok. We use that same kind of hypothesis for our retail partners. The Whole Foods consumer is a very different consumer than the Kroger consumer, than they are the Costco consumer. So I think at a basis there, getting a lot of those kind of insights has really made us efficient from an engagement perspective. And I think that from the media perspective, so much of retailer media, I would say, is kind of like this blind faith study, as a lot of these platforms are starting to build out their advertising units from scratch. they're obviously not going to be a Google or a Facebook day one. But where we, and that's kind of understood, but where we've seen, massive value with partners like Kroger and 84.51, it's like being able to get kind of directional data in a way where you guys are seeing across these 30 or 40 or 50 brands. I'm sure it's a lot more than just that you guys are working with, when they're advertising, what kind of keywords are doing really well for the consumers, what types of placements are doing well for the consumers. If we're doing, individual store studies of, we wanted to go test out a couple types of media, and what is it actually doing in terms of number of in-store add to carts, adding to, carts themselves, what does that actually look like? So I think that kind of pulling off that, getting rid of the actual like red tape in itself and saying like, hey, here's what this is actually doing for your business, for your products, for your velocities, for your consumer. I think that's how retailer media partnership should really be kind of set up moving forward.
Sure. Yeah. And as simple as it is, like keyword being partnership, right? Like we're working in such close proximity, right? In terms of data that we're working with on the retail side and data you're working with, knowing your consumer and your brand message, right? It is much more true partnership than just, media vendor and, brand, if you will, right? Hey, here, buy my thing, right? Versus, hey, I know you work with a bunch of different retailers. For my retailer X, right? We found this interesting insight. Here's a potential activation strategy, knowing your business that may be a solve, right? And operating that way.
I think what's also going to be really cool is, over time, as we start to lean off of this full digital world and we kind of go back into in-store experiential, life moments that people are going to be looking for. I think those conversations of like, well, how does, for example, how does Kroger actually place itself from a media perspective of, you have the retailer media, we're doing sampling, but what are some of those new innovations that you guys are doing on your front to engage with consumers? And like we were talking about partnerships wise, how does HealthAde, for example, really plug in to drive, a really deep connection with the consumer when we are doing really big, massive brand campaigns?
Sure.
So like those are all things that super excited for.
Love it. One last question, then we do have a question in the chat I want to get to, but going back to the HealthAde marketing strategy side, I think this is one that's been top of mind with everyone. But how do your whether it's your strategies or your consumer engagement efforts differ? Thinking about new households and driving continued household penetration and growth, especially as a continually growing brand. I think you've talked on the loyalty side, right? With the emails, SMS, making sure that's part of the media strategy. But how do you guys think about a little bit more on the gaining household side as well?
It leads back to, I think, the way that we go about building content, right? It's when we're looking to drive new household penetration, rather than making content that is made for everyone, and we're just trying to go like wide net as possibly and see if it hits with consumers. Like let's call the analogy like everybody up until this point all being served like vanilla ice cream is the joke I always make of like, not everybody actually likes vanilla. There's a huge amount of consumers that do actually like it, but why force that decision to the consumer? Like, how do we offer different flavors, let's call it, or different angles for consumers to engage with? Do some consumers really care about understanding more about gut health, the benefits behind it, what it's actually doing for them? Some people look to our product for more just like digestive health. When their stomach is upset, they're looking to go and get some probiotics in them. And then some consumers just genuinely love the product. Like they just drink kombucha because they like the way that it tastes and the way that they feel as a result of it. So when we're looking at driving household penetration, it's like, how do we lean into those angles and those pieces of content that get people to really, connect with the brand to then see if they want to go and try our products?
Love it. Yeah, no, I think that's the strategy that, continues to validate, right? Is taking the more personal approach. And, like you said, it's not why kombucha for all, right? But rather why kombucha for Andrew versus Shray in a lot of scenarios.
Exactly.
And, the channels and the way I engage is oftentimes going to be different than how you do,
Right.
right? How I purchase, how you purchase, et cetera. So no, love that.
Looks like we got some
Um,
Q&A going.
We've got some questions here. Let me start. So there's a clarifier on this one. Love your products. Pleased to see kombucha expanding, out of specialty stores into grocery and drug. So, great there. But interesting question. Do you believe that enough meaningful marketing will allow you to grow and expand into other venues like convenience, sporting venues, vending machines, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, luckily we're already going into C-store and we're kind of expanding there. So that's been a category that's doing extremely well for us as we kind of scale up. I think it's less about like, are you spending enough on pumping awareness? I think it's really like kind of going through and educating on consumption, right? So it's like, how does this product actually fit into your life? For me or for, other consumers, it might be in the morning, whenever you're, starting off your day. Is that, when you're about to go for a long drive and you need something that's like super satiating? I think it's more about just kind of connecting consumption behaviors to these moments, right? Like if you're at a sporting venue, yes, there's going to be a bunch of people that love their beer, but also there's going to be a bunch of people that don't want to drink that. And so like, what is an amazing like alternative there that's still bubbly, that's still, based in
Right.
natural products that you can have with your, whatever your crazy nachos or your hot dogs. A kombucha actually fits quite well into that space. Or like we're kind of expanding into our different products, HealthAde Pop, right? Like we have a soda alternative that we're kind of building to match consumers' kind of lifestyle. So sure, a kombucha nut might be for you for every single moment of the day, but try it out other stuff. Like Pop fits into so many different parts of your life as well. So taking bets on kind of product innovation to kind of get into that, every single space in every single moment that we can get into.
Sure. Yeah. Kind of on the flip side of that, another question here. Thoughts on how consumers respond to kind of limited or exclusive products? I don't know if you guys have done this much,
Oh,
but
I love this. Yeah. Consumers freak out for limited or, seasonal products. Like the best example of it is like pumpkin spice, right? That in an industry in itself has grown into $1 billion industry just by a seasonal SKU. And so for us, when we're kind of looking at it, there's both the digital and the in-store moments. So from a digital perspective, it is an amazing tool of driving new customer acquisition. If it's something that looks very different, the scarcity mindset, let me hop on it because all of my friends are talking about it. I think that from like a re-engagement tool with our consumers, that like changing up your everyday offering and providing something that has a little bit more of an opportunity to do some storytelling of what this product is, why it's limited, why we made it. I think it's an amazing way of getting people back into the brand, buying second, third, fourth time. But from an in-store perspective, those like seasonal SKUs do just a killer job of the same two things, like driving a lot of new customer acquisition. But for a company at our scale, that repeat of like every single quarter or every single winter, I know that holiday cheers is going to be back in shelves for us. That is something that I've been looking forward to. That's actually like one of the ways that I started to engage with HealthAde was their seasonal SKU. And so over time, we're going to start to do more of that kind of innovation behind that. Like how do we kind of engage with consumers with fun contextual flavors that make sense for them throughout whatever times of the year that they're in.
yeah, no, I think that's such a cool, new marketing strategy we've continued to see, right? Like what have we learned from like the sneaker industry and like streetwear and all this, right? Like the limited
Yeah.
inventory, right, drives so much demand and curiosity and everything else.
You can also do it to build brand, right? Like a huge amount of brands are using that limited time SKU as a partnership opportunity. So how do you connect with another brand, do something that's really cool together, both tell that story to kind of have that overlapping audience, so that you can just grow that like total top of or that engaged consumer basis. So
Sure.
huge fan of it and just as a strategy.
Yeah. Yeah. Fun one here. Any thoughts on the NFT space and how that might fit into brand strategy for content / influencers?
TBD. I think that like right now.
That's how I would answer that too.
Yeah. I think that NFTs are a great way of engaging with your very hardcore digital consumer that's also into crypto. And like as crypto scales, NFTs as an engagement tool, like let's see if it scales. But the question is it more of a trend, or is it more of a moment that'll kind of die out after a couple of months or a year or so? And so for us, yes, those kind of hopping on moments and opportunities are great ways of kind of staying connected with what's going on, but we're really focusing a lot of our activations on like what are some of those like long-term value drivers. So TBD, because if it is the case, like you're going to see a bunch of NFTs from HealthAde. So yeah.
Awesome. Love it. I had to ask that one. I was like, that's a cool question.
So funny. Yeah.
Well, that kind of wraps for us. Any kind of parting words or final thoughts?
Nothing really. I think that like the last thing that I would say is like we just went through a massive rebrand. We've updated all of our packaging. We've updated the digital experience for HealthAde on health-ade.com. I would push everybody who's here sitting today to go and check out the website where, the whole marketing team is super proud of how that kind of came out. And you'll see us in store because, there's no way that you can't see us now at this point. And also go to Kroger. Great.
There you go. Yeah. Shameless plug.
Yeah.
Buy HealthAde at Kroger. It's perfect marriage.
Perfect.
Awesome. No,
all right.
Fun conversation. Like I said, it's the convergence of, still driving scale, but how do we bring personalization, authenticity, accountability to the space, right? Whether that's, obviously digital is a huge driver of that, but, how do we bring that to the overall marketing landscape, right? And whether we're talking online purchase or brick and mortar purchase. So, I think you and I could go on talking about this for probably another hour or so.
Right, exactly.
But welcome anyone. Shray and I are both tagged with the LinkedIn posts from Brand Innovators and everything. Welcome any additional conversations. So feel free to reach out, and happy to continue these conversations offline.
All righty. Is this where we call Ryan back in? Is Ryan there?
Maybe.
I just shot him a note. There he is.
Hey, everybody. Hang on one sec. My volume isn't working.
We hear you.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
I don't know why my audio was like off there for a second.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
All right. So,
well, thank you. Hang on one sec. Thank you both so much for joining us here today. We really appreciate it. To the both of you and to all of our listeners at home, we're going to go ahead and close up this particular event right now. Andrew and Shray, thank you so much for being here. To our listeners at home, I just want to say a big thank you for taking the time to be here today. To all of our sponsors, thank you so much for being here as well. To all of our speakers, thank you for taking your time and your energy out of your busy day to be here. Tomorrow, we are going to have another Brand Innovators live cast taking place at noon. That's going to be our Behind the Brand live cast. You don't want to miss that. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be amazing. Please check it out. And so, yeah, that's it for now. Thank you, everybody. Have a terrific day, and we'll see you next time.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Ryan.